Welcome everybody to the Articulation series where art informs Torah and Torah forms in art. Each week we follow and present the learning trajectories of different artists and rabbis, and this is the culmination of a magnificent study between Ayeola Omolara Kaplan and Rabbi Mike Rothbaum. Without further ado, let me present our artist and rabbi. Ayeola Omolara Kaplan is a Black and queer Atlanta-based pop surrealist painter. Through depicting the intersections of identity, class, and spirituality, she hopes to contribute to the moving canon of revolutionary art. She creates with the belief that art can be weaponized as self-defense against an anti-truth culture plagued by unhealed generational trauma. Her work features empowering and electrifying imagery created to energize people as well as celebrate marginalized folks carrying themselves with clout. The pieces exist as spiritual tools created with the intention to manifest a blissful and equitable future. Rabbi Mike Rothbaum is a spiritual leader of Congregation Beit Elohim in Acton, Massachusetts. He serves on the advisory board of the Jewish Alliance of Law and Social Action, JALSA, and the New England Jewish Labor Committee, and is a member of TRUA, the rabbinic call for human rights. He lives in Acton with his husband, Yiddish singer Anthony Russell. And without further ado, Rabbi, would you please frame the portion for us?
Yes, it will be my honor and my blessing. So I've had different sound experiences, not in a good way, using Zoom. So if at any point my sound becomes difficult to hear or you're challenged to make out the words, just stop me. Feel free to interrupt. I want to say it's an incredible honor and blessing to work with the Amen Institute, and Devere, the vision of this program is really, really powerful. We do not support the arts in the United States nearly enough, and don't develop our relationship, our soul connection to art and creativity nearly enough. The Jewish community is starting to figure out how to heal some of that brokenness, and I think you're on the forefront of that. And Ayeola, my goodness, has been such an amazing thought partner and creative partner, and so excited to get to know you. And your what you've created has blown me away. We'll see that in a second. Um, let's start with where we are. If you're not familiar with um, the Torah at all, general arc of this whole 5 books of Moses project is that we have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, 5 books. Yeah. Genesis is really packed with action. You've got the creation of the world, the creation of humanity, the creation of good and evil and choice. And then you've got the birth of this crazy people, this people called by God to have a special mission, even though they're a tiny, nothing little runty people called Hebrews, and then Israelites, the predecessors of today's Jews, and their founding stories. The first 4 or 5 generations of the Jewish people show up in Genesis. In Exodus, things uh, go badly, as you probably know if you've been to a Seder recently. Um, the people that originally arrive um, in Egypt as essentially guest workers, right? They're immigrant laborers and help build the society, are suddenly um, turned into and I mean public enemy number one in a really troubling prefiguring of what happens throughout human history. Um, it is because of a force greater than weapons or money or power, that the Israelites can get out and they get free. And through a remarkable, extraordinary series of events, including pyrotechnics and walls of water, uh, amazing, amazing, amazing. They get a Torah, they get a pathway to life, Wow. And then that lands us in Leviticus. I'm skipping a little bit. And Leviticus is not a beloved book. This is like part three. It's like Godfather part three. We love the first one, we love the second one, third one. Like, there's a lot of laws about killing animals. I don't love this so far. Uh, and sure enough, the chief technological, the chief spiritual technology for the Jewish people is setting animals on fire for God. We might call it barbecue for God. Everybody loves barbecue, including God. So you set the animals on fire, the smoke rises up. Um, God likes the reach nichoach, the pleasing odor. Am I inspired? Maybe. There's a lot of rules about that. Then there's rules about what happens if you have skin afflictions, maybe some sort of problem, God forbid, in the walls of your house. And it's not feeling fantastically inspirational. And then, boom, we get to the middle of the book of Leviticus, and really the middle, and I would call it the heart of the Torah. And we got this thing that says Kedoshim. It says, you should be holy. Kedoshim to you all of you, and it's kol edat, the whole community. You should be holy. Wow, I can be holy, no kidding. Why should I be holy? Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Because holiness is an essential element and characteristic of me, God, talking to you, little runty nothing people. A, we can be holy. B, we can be holy because God allows us to emulate holiness. Wow, okay. So what does that mean? Does it mean go off on a mountain and meditate? Does it mean separate yourself from everybody? Turns out it's the opposite. It's about relationship, about how we arrange our relationships with each other, how we get out of Egypt and not replicate it. And that's, I think, a good segue to Ayeola, who has made incredibly arresting images about what it looks like when people really take that message to heart. And I'll come back and I'll talk more, but right now I want to shut up and let Ayeola show you her amazing creations.
Thank you. I was digging everything, so so excited to hear more. And yeah, I guess I'll just talk about the art now. So I just want to talk about sort of like overall what I created first. And it was really interesting creating the artwork for this piece, for Kedoshim, because it's just an incredibly complex, it's just really complex. There's so many different ideas. So I felt kind of weird just doing one piece. I wanted to make sure I did multiple. And my original idea was to do like 6 or 7. And then luckily Rabbi Mike was like, hey, maybe maybe that's a bit much, which I'm glad because it was already a lot doing the 3. So I wanted to deal with sort of 3 like most central themes that I got from the text that I felt was most relevant to Jewish people today. And this was love, earth, and justice. And so like all 3 sort of deal with like different energy, different types of vibes, but they're all from the same text. And I played with similar, like, I think the word is compositions with each pieces. They both deal with 2 figures, and I wanted each of the figures to sort of contrast and have like the comparing contrast between each figure. So they're reflecting the discord that I kind of felt with the piece, but they also created a lot of growth from reading it. Like I've read it like maybe like 4 or 5 times now, which is a lot for me to read a lot of the same thing over and over. And each time I got like different things, and like on my more final readings, I some of the text really stuck out to me, and that was the text that I wanted to highlight in the piece specifically. So I'll talk about starting with love. I'll start with love. And in love, that's kind of like, that was the first one I worked on. And I was really struck by the idea of loving your neighbor as you love yourself. That to me was sort of my favorite part of the whole text. So I wanted to create an image that sort of represented that. And I added supporting text that sort of embellish like what that means. What does it mean to love your neighbor as you love yourself? And yeah. So one of the things I thought was really interesting was the text where it said, you must reprove your neighbor or you would incur guilt yourself. And basically that's saying that you should talk to your neighbors about what you feel may be causing conflict, or basically call them out on something they may be doing wrong in a kindly way. Because otherwise you're guilty yourself. Like what your neighbor does actually matter to you. And I feel like that really relates to what Mike was talking about with building like a holy economy. Like we can't live in our world in such a like individualistic way. Like everything that we do affects the earth around us. It affects the people around us. When you buy a product, you know, whoever made that product, that's affecting them. When you throw it away, that affects like someone else. So that I thought that was like a really good line. And I wanted to create like a sort of connection between the two figures where they're sort of embracing, but also in a way like pushing and repelling each other. Like their connection is a struggle, but it's also like an embrace at the same time. And I feel like that's kind of what it is to share space with people. And then I also added the text on the shorts and one of the figures that says, none of us are free until we are all free. And that I feel like sort of adds more energy to the love your neighbor as you love yourself sort of thing. Like you can't really celebrate your own freedom until everyone's free, even the people who aren't necessarily your people that are free. Like we should all be able to enjoy living freely. Like how can we prosper when someone else is suffering? So that is just a short little thing about love. And the next piece that I did after that was justice. And that one was really fun because that's kind of like the realm that I love to work with the most, the sort of rageful energy. So I wanted to create something that was fiery, and I was looking at images of lava to inspire the background and the colors. And I just really love drawing women with swords. So this was like a really good chance to do that. And I put like little text on the swords to express what I feel like justice wouldn't entail. So I put sovereignty, reparations, accountability, and equity. And basically I wanted it to be like expressing that, I think it was in the love piece where it said that you shouldn't be pursuing vengeance, you should be pursuing justice. So I wanted to sort of show that like the fight for justice, like when you see people like in the streets angry with, you know, signs or even with like torches or whatever, like those people aren't just there, you know, calling for blood. Like we're calling for like accountability. We're calling for the land that was stolen. We're calling for, you know, being seen as the full human beings that we are. And I feel like this piece, we're sort of dealing with that energy. And then I put the text that related to that around that. And one of my favorite parts of it is there's a text that says, you shall not render an unjust judgment, which I think was really relevant in America, especially where we have what I like to call the injustice system. And I feel like it's part of like the Jewish fight, you know, part of our like our spiritual practice to advocate for a world where like justice isn't something that is relative to your skin color or your economic status or your education or your mental health, you know, stuff like that. And then also there was the text that said, you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, or I forgot what the other part was, but basically I got from that you should not revile the deaf. But yeah, so basically I was thinking that really dealt with like disability justice and making sure that we have a world where everyone can feel safe in the spaces we occupy together, and that we should give them the accommodations that they need. So that I feel like goes in with the whole idea of justice, like justice should help everybody regardless of their ability. And then I'm trying to remember what the text was like around it. I have it too. Okay, so you shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. That particular line was something that me and Rabbi Mike talked about a lot together, because at first glance, it caused like some discord, I think, because it's like, obviously you would want to support the poor over the rich because the poor have less resources, less connections, a lot more to gain, a lot more that they need to fight for. And the rich have a lot more that they can give. But we were speculating that this idea of not, deferring or being partial to one or the other suggests that we should have a society where neither class is like needing more from the other, like a society where basically there is no rich and there is no poor. So we wouldn't need to be doing everything we can to basically support the poor. And I feel like that was really powerful because in our current society, we kind of accept poverty and homelessness as like normal. It gets to the point where people don't even like acknowledge homeless people because it's such a like thing ingrained in our system. But if we were to say, hey, you know what, that's not normal. We shouldn't have to be partial to the poor. We shouldn't have to give huge tax breaks to the rich. Like we should be able to have a system where everyone gets what they need. And that was really exciting to see in the Torah. And then one of my favorite lines from the whole text was, "You shall not profit by the blood of your neighbor." I put all my favorite lines at the bottom of the piece. And I thought that was just like really incredible because that for me was just like really explicitly like very of the energy of like, a holy economy that we're trying to build. Like, I feel like it's such a basic thing, but at the same time, it's really like, what's the word? Groundbreaking, I guess, because our system that we live in now profits from so much blood. It's like inherently like built from blood. Shedding blood is like the biggest way to make money in this world. So I feel like that particular text is like really awesome to be inspired by. And the last piece I did was Earth. And in Earth, I wanted to talk about two parts of the text that really I thought were super interesting. And that is Leviticus 19, 9. And that one's all about how you shouldn't reap your entire harvest for yourself. And I thought that was important to give its own spotlight because, no matter what you do for yourself, you have to acknowledge that this world, this land isn't just yours. It's not like you can't do anything yourself. So you shouldn't just take everything for yourself. And, it was saying that you should give the very edges of your field to the poor, and also said the alien. And from that, I took that like, whatever profit you make, whatever you learn for yourself, whatever things that you build, you have to make sure that it's in some way contributing positively to the people around you, especially the people who have less resources, and especially the people who are very different from you. So you shouldn't do things that just benefit only like Jewish people or people of color or people who have the same economic status or education as you do. Like you should be reaching out to people from different backgrounds. And then the other part that I was really interested in was Leviticus 19:23. And that was basically saying that when you plant trees for food, you can't reap that harvest until 5 years after, which I know people don't do anymore. But I think the principle behind that was pretty cool. That you're kind of just, you don't do this work just for the immediate reward. You have to trust that in God, that like the reward that you're working towards will come. It'll be super bountiful, but like whatever you're doing, it's not just for you in that immediate sense of reward, which I think is really cool because in our current society, everything we do, we expect immediate results. And we expect immediate results for ourselves. We don't really spend much time acknowledging like the people that helped us get to where we are. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, that's kind of the overall of those three pieces. I can get into like little details and stuff, but I'm not gonna, I'll let y'all ask whatever you're most interested in because I could talk for a long time about the art. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Rabbi, do you have any reactions, thoughts, also to bring in some of the insights that came about through your study as well?
I do. So just process-wise, the questions that came in the chat, do we want to wait to get to those, or do we want to do them now, or?
We'll get to them in about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we'll give space for you here.
Yeah. So, knowing that Ayeola has used her art for advocacy and activism was already really powerful. And to see how the themes that are in the text came out visually was just, it just kind of blew me away. First of all, I just love there's a sense that they're like the figures are like decontextualized and they're taken out of time in a way. I mean, they could be like ancient, they could be futuristic, like are they are they wearing animal skins, are they wearing sweatsuits, like are they from the future, are they from space, are they from prehistoric times? Like I think there's like elements of all of that in what you've created, Ayeola. And I think there's yeah, I mean, like, are they space boots, are they like, you know there's a sense of like this could all be, this could be something that is 3,000 years old or 3,000 years in the future. It could be here. It could be, in Andromeda galaxy. I don't know. I'm not an astronomer. But there's a timelessness to this that these are not, there's a tendency in looking at Torah, particularly when we get uncomfortable with some of the stuff that we're looking at. And, it should be noted, there's slavery is mentioned in the text. There's gender stuff that's going on in the text we might not be comfortable with, right? There's a tendency to be like, oh, well, that's back then, and then we really neuter the text and take away its power by saying, oh, it's like some relic from olden times, but by creating these images that are, again, are they in space? Are they today? Are they tomorrow? Or are they a million years ago? The sense that love, earth, and justice are all things that these are touchstones for us to focus on eternally is really powerful. Just a few things that showed up in the images besides that, some of the words. I mean, I just love the use of words. That you connected in the love piece that we brought in tochacha. We brought in, you must reprove your neighbor. Is this the love piece? This is the one where they're, yeah, in the left side, you must reprove your neighbor, right? And that you actually, that sometimes that love is not an embrace. Sometimes it is a wrestling. Sometimes it is a pushing. Sometimes it's a challenge to be your best self. There's a text when Adam and Eve are created, Adam and Chava, and I don't want to get too into it, into the grammar, but there's a sense that they're actually a splitting of one being rather than Eve being taken as a rib, and which is not a, it seems to set up a gender hierarchy, right? But if Eve is actually a part of humanity, right? And then we split humanity into male and female. Eve is created as Ezer Kenegdo, it says in the Hebrew, literally a helper against, right? And you think those two ideas of helper and against, right? Against could be next to, but sometimes the best way to help somebody is to push them to be better and to rise to their best self, right? And this tochacha, to reprove somebody, is to say, I know you, I know who you are, and I know the blessings that are inside of you. You may have been raised up in this society to think the most important thing was to take and to hoard resources, land, time, money, but that's not what we were born for. We were born for holiness, which means to create an equitable system. It means to look at the earth and see it not as something to grab onto and take as much as you can of, but actually, and if we could go to that earth section, yeah, where we sit, where the land that you have is actually not yours completely. You actually have to leave part of it over for other people to come onto your land. And then it's somewhere it says, I can't find it. Somewhere it just says, let go. Where does this, do I have that? Yeah, there it is, on her knee. And what a beautiful distillation of, like, it's not all your land, right? You've got all of this stuff, and hey, you know what? Let go of a little bit of it. You don't have to, like you're trying to grab everything. There's a text in the Talmud that says tafasta maruba lo tafasta, which means the person who grabs everything grabs nothing, essentially, or like people who, if you grab everything, you don't grab anything. So if you set up your land and your stuff and your property and your produce as all yours, you set it up as an idol, and it's never enough, right? Let it go. Give other people the opportunity to come onto your space and have it. A particular specific implication of this, by the way, of the poor and the immigrant coming onto your land. I talked about this on Shabbos, because we're 1 week off. We use the Israeli calendar. There are these stand your ground laws in different parts of the country, right? Where if somebody walks onto your property, you can kill them, right? Which is what I believe that was the justification for George Zimmerman killing Trayvon Martin of blessed memory, right? You think about that. Somebody encroaches on your space and you're allowed to kill them. And here we have a text which is saying the exact opposite, that you can have boundaries, you can have borders, it could be quote unquote your land, and you have to let go, as you wrote on the knee there. And you have to say, a person is going to come onto my land and they're going to have barley or rye or wheat or whatever, cotton, linen, it's whatever it is that's in my domain. But I know that I was able to produce this through a network of partnerships throughout my land and obviously through God. My economy cannot just be for individual selfishness. It's got to have holiness in the connections. And there it is. Yeah, when you reap the harvest of your land, don't reap the edges of the field. Leave it for the poor and the oni and the ger. The oni, the poor, the ger, the immigrant. We'll go to justice, and then I'll tell you just some things that really moved me. I think that's where we have these just fantastically powerful looking people who have swords and knives, but they're doing it. They're clearly set up for, in the corners you see the scales of justice, and you see a fist in the air. But then in the other corners, you see the earth. You see the whole earth, and you see hands of different ethnicities in partnership. Yeah. So we're fighting, we're struggling for justice, but we're doing it in community, in a sense, with a sense that this is a global struggle. Yeah. Is this the one where, yeah, and there's justice, she's walking in justice, literally. Is this the one where it says, we are holy, we are dust? Is that this piece?
That's on the bottom of the bucket in Earth.
Oh, so that's in the last one. Okay. Yeah, which is, it just, yeah, there it is. It just reminded me, by the way, of a Hasidic story, which it says you have to keep two truths in your pocket, right? That the world was created for my sake. Do you know this story, Ayeola? Yeah, are you familiar with this or no?
Yeah, that's where I got it from.
Oh, that's where you
That's,
got it from. Oh,
yeah.
perfect. Did we talk about this and I forgot?
No, I had this really awesome teacher in college, new college, Professor Marks, and she told the story. It was really cool.
Right, we both went to this tiny little weirdo school in Sarasota, Florida.
Huge coincidence.
New college, yeah. Which is where I, but by the way, did enough self-exploration to realize that coming from my secular, culturally Jewish family, I wanted to be a rabbi. But yeah, so there's this teaching, right, that you keep two truths in your pocket and you take one out when it's appropriate. One is that the world was created for my sake, right? Human beings are the pinnacle of creation. And yet I'm nothing but dust and ashes, which is what Abraham says when he argues with God about the principle of justice vis-a-vis the Sodom and Gomorrah story, right? Like if you kill innocent people, just because they happen to live in Sodom and Gomorrah, that's wrong, God. God, you're being unjust. But Abraham is humble when he says it and says, I am nothing but dust and ashes, right? So the balance of those two, I think, is another pathway to holiness. But wait, so let's go back to the justice, the first piece. Because again, we have these different, we have the swords, we have the modern shoes and the animal skins and the, you have to fight. It says on her earring, right? You have to fight your own damn war, right? So we know that we have, at the same time, we have this global struggle, and we all have to be hand in hand. Like you have to do a personal struggle, right? We're say, when the text says you have to have just weights and measures, right? And lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, don't profit from the blood of your neighbor, right? Excuse me. The whole culture tells you the opposite, right? There it is on the bottom, right? The whole culture says take, right? And cheat people if you can get, you can get one up on them, right? Do you remember, I hate to invoke the past president, but remember there was a debate and there was a question about his taxes, and he said, well, if you can get out of paying your taxes, why wouldn't you? Right? Like that's being smart. Remember that? He said that debate. Yeah, it's being smart. Who wants to pay more taxes, right? Well, wait, what about this idea that we're all in this together? What about this idea that we're a community? And so I don't know. Maybe you didn't mean it that way, Ayeola. We didn't talk about it, but when the earrings say you have to fight your own damn war, it's like you have to fight your own personal struggle to give in to the greater values of selfishness and greed and avarice, and caveat emptor, right? Let the buyer beware. It's the exact opposite of what Kedoshim is telling us, which is that the seller has a holy obligation in a holy economy to do right by the buyer, even when the seller has more power. Don't have, and we talk about this avel b'mishpat, don't do sinning, violent sin in judgment. 20 verses later, it shows up in weights and measures, where it says don't have sinfully false measures, right? When you sell something, you're acting as a judge. I keep hearing noises like somebody's trying to tell me to stop talking.
No, you're good.
So yeah, when you're when you're a seller, when you're involved in commerce, you're acting like a judge. You have power. And don't sin through lying about what you're selling. And of course, we have these other teachings about. Oh, we have these other teachings about don't withhold your wages, the wages of a worker. And I'll finish with this because I know we want other people. I gotta stop talking, but I love this parsha. Such a blessing to get assigned it. Don't steal, which is verse 11, is in between. Don't take all the harvest for yourself, and don't take the wages of a laborer. So we see theft is connected, as Ayeola has beautifully illustrated. Theft, which we think of as just walking into the CVS and stealing a Snickers bar, right? Theft is related actually to land and to how we treat the planet, and it's also related to how we treat employees and customers. So and that's the basis, I hope, of holy economy. That's the vision. Not easy. None of this is easy, right? And you see that, and people asked about the segmented body parts, right? To me, that just shows that none of this work can literally tear you apart. It's a lot easier than saying like, oh, if I drop a prayer book, I have to kiss it. This is like, oh, how do we arrange society so it's holy? That's much harder, but it's the vision that the text lays out for us. I'll stop there.
I just want to say thank you for going on off about like my piece and like pointing out the things that you really spoke to you. I really appreciated like the little details that you noticed and your interpretations of them too. It's really cool because when you do an art piece, you never know how it's gonna be received. You have guesses, and you're like, no one's gonna notice this, and then like when someone does and has like all these thoughts about it, it's really nice. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, I'll say there's a lot going on there, so
Yeah, I put a lot.
it really invites deep looking. The more you look, the more that's there. So it just, I mean, any one of those pieces would have been a beautiful midrash on the text, and the fact that you did a triptych is very powerful.
Ayeola, Kate wants to know about you discussed that there's different ways of contrasting and seeing the characters together and also the colors. Do you want to speak to the thought of like the particular colors that you used for each of the figures?
Yeah, I was dealing a lot with, I wanted the piece to sort of like Rabbi Mike said, not represent a singular people through time. Like I wanted them to be really timeless, and I also wanted them to be really like ethereal, sort of like spirits that represent these energies. So they're definitely like human alike, but I didn't want them to be too grounded in our like physical reality. So I chose, colors that I feel like no one has these days. Yeah, but I did choose to do like more human skin colors for the little corners of the pieces. Because I wanted those to be sort of like what grounds the pieces together and what brings them to earth. So the people in the middle of the piece are sort of like the abstract vibes, and then like the frame, the text, and the stuff inside the little like corners is what brings it to earth. So that's why I chose the colors.
Rabbi, in the background of love is like a dichotomy between sun and moon. I'm curious if you have any can bring any Jewish insights to that dichotomy and what that speaks to in this narration of kind of a complex love.
Huh. Well, that's good. I hadn't thought of that, Devere, but I like it.
You got all the
What's that? Was that Ayeola?
Devere just comes up with some really good questions.
Severe, yeah, he's the master of the good question. Okay, well, off the top of my head, since you asked, um, I guess I think of Eladon. There's the morning blessings when we talk about creation. Um, Mitzetim say some Mitzetim, but they go out and the heavenly bodies go out in joy and come in peace. Sasim Bavoam. Yeah. Um, so I guess there's something about moving that the heavenly bodies have their own personalities, right? That they go through the skies in the course of their orbits, but they're not just rocks, right? They have will and volition and emotions. We know there's arguments in Midrash about who gets to be in charge, right? Like the moon wants to be in charge, but it can't be. The sun is more powerful, but then the moon will reflect the moon, which rules the night, will reflect the sun's light. Um, and that there's something beautiful about being able to reflect somebody else's light. Yeah. Um, the moon, though, of course, even though it's not as powerful, um, I should say, of course, often is seen as a metaphor for the Jewish people, a symbol of the Jewish people. Um, that the moon wanes and eventually disappears in the night sky on Rosh Chodesh, but it comes back. It always comes back. It always waxes, and in the middle of the month, on the 15th of every month, you got a full moon. So I don't know. That's just off the top of my head, though, Devere. So I don't know. Ayeola, is there? We never talked about the sun and the moon in this, and I don't know. I'm not even sure. I was conscious of the fact that that's what I was looking at. So what do you think?
Um, I thought of the sun and the moon when I thought of the "you should love your neighbor as yourself" thing.
Okay.
When I read that, like my mind just immediately went towards like yin and yang type of energy. So I really wanted
Mm.
to create something that was like, masculine, feminine, dark, light, small, large, like balance. And I feel like the one of the ultimate symbols for that would be the sun and the moon. Because the moon's the night, the sun's the day. And then like, you love your neighbors, you love yourself. So like those two energies, that contrasting um, beauty, it's all like one of a whole system. Um,
Hmm.
and they're both incredibly valuable and they bleed into each other too. And neither would,
Hmm.
well, I think the sun would be fine without the moon, but, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting though, right? Because the moon is, I mean, obviously we're dealing in metaphor here, right? But
Mhm,
the moon is the receiver of the light, right? And reflector of the light. Yeah. So
mhm.
the sun would be okay without the moon, but it's for us, from our
Yeah.
point of view in the earth, we see this body that receives and reflects, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the moon, uh, uh, right? So the sun is giving, and the
Hmm.
moon is receiving.
Yeah.
So there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. I don't have a fully developed thought here, but there's a dance there, right?
Hmm.
In what and what you've shown in front of it, right? Is it an embrace? Is it a pushing? Is it a loving? Is it a struggle?
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and also the kind of the Jewish calendar chooses to demarcate its time through the moon as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to through the sun, and kind of like maybe embodying some of that reflective love energy as being kind of a source of that. That's the time that we want to emulate. um there's a question about also the Ezra Kenegdo kind of relationship between Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And I think in one end that conversation matches to what you were talking about in love, but then also Reish Lakish is someone who kind of comes from the outside and who had a background as a bandit. Maybe if you have any thoughts about kind of the story of justice from a perspective of also opening up and like who gets included into society.
Who is the question for?
I think it's better for you.
They also love each other, you know. I mean, and Rish Lakish and Yochanan's love is potentially physical, right? There's implications of that in the Talmud that that they're, you know, that they really appreciate the physical beauty of each other potentially. But the outsider sometimes is the one who teaches the insider the beauty of their own tradition, right? I mean, again, receiving the light and reflecting it back like the moon does. You know, I mean, think of Jethro and Moses as another model, right? Where Jethro is a Midianite priest. He's not an Israelite at all. And he comes to visit Moses in the desert and is like, oh, by the way, what you're doing is wrong. You need a system of justice, right? And we're open enough as a people to say, oh, okay, Midianite priest, like, yeah, you can teach us about lower courts and higher courts. And, you know, if you don't know that it's, Jethro says to have a, you know, the big stuff goes to Moses. He's the Supreme Court, and the lesser questions go to lower courts, right? Now that some of the Talmudic discussion want to make Jethro a convert, but there's nothing in the text that implies that. But anyway, can we talk about the segmented body parts? Because I know that came up in the chat, and it's one of the, I think is that okay?
Yeah.
It's one of the most arresting parts of these images.
Well, I'll talk about it. So I've been doing like segmented body parts in my art for pretty long while, I would say, since like the early days of college. Just because it feels really grounding to do. I don't know, to draw a figure and then draw their body like segmented in some way. Like it in some ways it makes the figure seem more ethereal, but it also makes the figure seem more human because it's sort of exposing their temporality, I guess. But I've also received like over time notes that like me doing the segmenting body parts was making some people feel a little like it made them think of like pain, which is not what I wanted. So this piece, I wanted to make the segments more abstract. So instead of them like revealing like blood and bone, I wanted them to reveal other aspects of like human nature. So with the center figures and earth, I wanted like a sort of compare and contrast thing. So the figure with grow on her shirt, she was, you know, supposed to be like representing sort of like plant like energy, trees, you know, growth and like decay. But I gave her like inside of her like water, like that type of energy, with the color of the rings. And then the figure on the left, he was supposed to be representing, you know, water energy, but I gave him within a sort of like tree ring imagery there. And I wanted that to sort of show like, you know, water and earth, you know, need each other to exist. So that was sort of going with like that compare and contrast thing. But also like that's a huge part of like our humanity too. Like water and earth are like what allows us to even exist on the planet. So we're like really linked to those forces. And then on the injustice, I used the same colors, I think, in both of them. with the segments. And I just wanted to do sort of a lava energy. I kind of had this in my mind that, so like the earth figures are like on the earth, they're on the surface of the earth. And then the justice figures are like in the earth's core. And then the love figures are like in space. So the earth core figures, their segments are like, you know, magma, like lava within them. And I wanted that to represent like rage. So, you know, as holy as we can be, we have so much rage in us. And I feel like that's holy too, because from reading the Torah, God sure does get mad sometimes too. So I feel like that's a really beautiful part of us, that we can like not let some things go, that we would want accountability, reparations, you know, land, equity, like, and you really don't have the energy to fight for that sort of thing unless you're a little mad about it, unless you're like feeling that sort of like really hot desire, like just that like fire type of energy. And then I didn't add segments to the love figures because they represent sort of like a complete wholeness. So through embracing you know, the stranger, through embracing your neighbor, embracing, you know, the sun and the moon, that creates a wholeness. So when you're not just dealing with your earthly, like water, fluidity, forgiving energy, and you're not just dealing with your rage or like firedness, when you've got a mesh of the two, that creates wholeness. But, you know, all three pieces suggest that you don't need to exist in each realm all the time. Like you can choose whichever fits for the moment. So you're not always going to feel whole, and that's all right. Yeah.
Can I jump in and just,
Yeah.
I mean, just say what the obvious here, which is that the figures are, to me, I think they're clearly black and brown folks, or at least most of them are.
I definitely,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, should we take that to be Ayeola is an artist of color, and that's you know, representation matters? Should we read something else into that? Or just who you like to represent? Uh, anything
Yeah.
that's worth saying about that?
I guess a lot of it has to do with me wanting to center like the most marginalized people. And I feel like while they're just, you know, Black Jews, Jews of color aren't like super often depicted, I guess. So I feel like it's my I wouldn't say job, it's my honor to do work that centers that. And then another aspect of it is creating self-love within myself. When I first started doing art, I literally did not draw people of color because I didn't really see us as beautiful, which is really sad to say, but I went to like an all white high school, and not all white high school, all white like elementary school, and then like my middle school was very, very white, and just I was around like, you know, just the media in America creates that sort of belief. And then someone pointed it out to me. They're like, why don't you ever draw people of color? And I was like, whoa, I didn't even think of it because it was like subconscious. But ever since then, I've been actively trying to make sure that I draw more people of color, because that helps me see myself as beautiful. Like when I draw someone with, you know, lips that are like mine, skin that are like mine, eyes that are like mine, helps me like reflect back to myself positive energy. So it's also a little bit of self, I don't know, self-love there. And then, yeah, then I also became love. I really love drawing like really, really large lips, and I love drawing like braids and dreadlocks and really thick hair. Um, and you know, really big boobs and stuff like that. I like to draw there. So yeah, that's kind of where that goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, again, he said love. It's yeah. I mean, all of it's here. Love, love, earth, justice. You know, you know, who we are as part of the earth. And making sure that we're included. as who we are ethnically, religiously, spiritually, is justice and love, self-love. I mean, these two figures on the love panel could be both reflections of you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's that fight your own fight thing, right? You gotta not just fight against messages of be as greedy as you can and take as much as you can, but that you have to live up to somebody else's standards of beauty when these are just such beautiful figures.
Thank you.
And created in God's image, of course. B'Tselem Elohim. Oh, Devere, you're
Thank
muted.
you
Yeah, there you
really
go.
both. It's been just so inspiring to see that reflective energy that you both have kind of shared in with each other in order to think through and to allow the journey of the creation of the Torah and the art to really proliferate in a really beautiful way, and to kind of take art and to transform something from the text that, like, I wouldn't have thought that these are the images of Kedoshim, but you made it, you personalized it, and you created that and made it so vivid and real. Is just so beautiful. And like to the details of thinking through what the outfits of someone representing justice looks like, and and going into the details of all throughout, from the kind of minutia of it to the abstract. It's been very exhilarating to witness. And it's very fitting also that this week, when the conversation was turned in this parsha on one about holy economy, we started off this week on May Day, and thinking about labor laws and pushing that voice really comes through, that we can create holiness not just in abstractions in terms about the Torah, as you described in your Dvar Torah, Rabbi, or talk about holiness in regards to the land, but very specifically to how we treat other people. And holiness really emanates from our relational holiness, and everything kind of grows from that, from our cores out to space. I wish everyone a lovely and reflective Shabbat as we enter into a Shabbat where we say, not Kedoshim is out in the world, but Kedoshim to you, that each one of us can embody that sense of holiness.
Thank you.
Devere, can we, Ayeola, I think you have a website, right? Can we
Yes, yeah.
I do have a website. I'll put that in the chat. I also want to say thank you to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Sapira and Kate, for your questions and your engagement in the chat off my website. There. Oh, I put a direct message. Oops.
And I'll just say this has been a really special opportunity for me, and so grateful.
Yeah.
So grateful. Okay.
I also want to say to Ronnie, who asked if like the figures, like if you could have holiness on your own, I would say yes, you can have holiness anytime, anywhere, by yourself, with other people. But I would say holiness with another person is doubled, so it's better.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.